Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the paint-stained leather shoes of a Renaissance master in 1503 Florence, where creating art means navigating a world of toxic pigments, demanding patrons, and enough political intrigue to make modern Hollywood look tame. You're about to discover what it really took to survive as an artist when a single mistake could bankrupt you, poison you, or land you in a dungeon. And honestly, you probably won't survive this without developing a serious appreciation for your local art supply store. Through the next few minutes, you'll uncover the shocking reality of how Renaissance painters actually lived, worked, and schemed their way through each day. From the moment they opened their eyes in cramped workshops to the candlelit hours when they finally pursued their true artistic vision. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing our global community of history lovers gathering for these nighttime journeys. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first pale rays of dawn creep through the shutters of your workshop on Via dei Servi, and you're already awake before the church bells of Santa Maria del Fiore begin their morning chorus. Sleep never comes easily when you're calculating whether you can afford both rent and ultramarine blue this month. Spoiler alert, you usually can't. Your back aches from the straw mattress you've wedged into the corner of your studio, because separate living quarters are a luxury reserved for masters like Leonardo, not struggling artists like yourself trying to make it in the most competitive art scene in human history. You stretch, feeling every joint protest after yesterday's 12-hour painting session, and immediately your eyes dart to the canvas propped against the far wall. Even in the dim morning light, you can see the Virgin Mary's face staring back at you with that expression you've been perfecting for weeks, serene yet knowing, holy yet human. The commission from the Medici banker is your ticket to eating something other than bread and watered wine for the next month, assuming you can finish it without the client changing his mind about the composition for the 15th time. The workshop smells like a medieval chemistry lab explosion. Linseed oil, ground minerals, rabbit skin glue, and that peculiar metallic tang that comes from lead white pigment. Historians still argue whether Renaissance painters fully understood how toxic their materials were. But you're pretty sure the tremor in old Master Benedetto's hands wasn't from artistic passion. You've learned to work with the windows open when possible, though Florence's air isn't exactly pristine, with all the wool dyeing operations and leather tanning happening throughout the city. Your stomach growls, reminding you that artistic inspiration doesn't pay for breakfast. The wooden chest where you keep your coins feels lighter each time you open it, and today's weight test confirms your fears. Maybe enough for bread and some questionable cheese. Definitely not enough for the good wine that helps you tolerate your more demanding clients. You make a mental note to visit the market early before the prices rise with the sun, though you'll need to time it perfectly between your morning light assessment and your appointment with that insufferable silk merchant who wants his entire family painted as biblical figures. The floorboards creak as you move around the workshop, a sound that's become as familiar as your own heartbeat. This space represents everything you've worked for since arriving in Florence 5 years ago with nothing but raw talent and dangerous optimism. The walls are lined with wooden panels in various stages of preparation, sketches pinned everywhere like a madman's conspiracy board, and enough painting supplies to stock a small army of artists, if you could afford to replace them when they run out. You pause at the window, looking out at the city that's slowly coming to life. Florence in 1503 is the center of the artistic universe, where every street corner seems to harbor another genius and every wealthy family wants to commission the next masterpiece. It's intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure, like being a small fish in a pond filled with sharks who happen to paint beautifully. The competition isn't just fierce, it's literally life or death for your career, your reputation, and your ability to eat regularly. The morning light filtering through your workshop windows is your most valuable tool and your biggest challenge. You've learned to read it like a farmer reads weather patterns, knowing exactly when the illumination will be perfect for mixing flesh tones, and when it will turn that tricky yellow that makes everything look jaundiced. Today's light promises to be good, clear but not harsh, steady but not flat. Perfect for the detailed work you need to complete on the banker's wife's hands, assuming you can keep them steady enough despite the growing anxiety about your dwindling funds. You approach yesterday's work with the critical eye of a master and the nervous stomach of someone whose rent depends on perfection. The morning light reveals both triumphs and disasters in equal measure. The virgin's face captures that ethereal quality you've been chasing, but her left hand looks like it belongs to a dock worker rather than the mother of God. This is the daily reality of Renaissance painting. Every brushstroke is a gamble with expensive materials, and there's no undo button when you're working with oil paint that costs more per ounce than most people earn in a week. Your fingers trace the air above the canvas, never quite touching the surface as you mentally catalog what needs adjustment. The ultramarine blue in Mary's robes gleams like captured sky, and you feel a brief moment of pride before remembering that those few square inches of color represent nearly a month's worth of meals. Ultramarine, ground from lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan, costs more than its weight in gold, literally. You've seen grown men weep over spilled ultramarine, and honestly, you'd probably join them. The technical challenges of oil painting are still being figured out by artists across Europe, and you're essentially conducting expensive experiments with every commission. Unlike the egg tempera your master taught you, these new oil techniques allow for subtle gradations and luminous depths that make paintings seem to glow from within. But they also take forever to dry, can crack if applied incorrectly, and have a tendency to change color as they age in ways that no one fully understands yet. Historians still argue whether the Flemish masters who developed these techniques were geniuses or just incredibly lucky with their chemical accidents. You step back to examine the composition's overall balance, squinting in that particular way artists develop after years of trying to see their work objectively. The banker commissioned a traditional Madonna and Child, but you've subtly incorporated elements that push beyond conventional religious imagery. The landscape visible through the window behind Mary shows recognizable Florentine hills, grounding the divine scene in earthly reality. It's a calculated risk. Too innovative and you'll be accused of heresy. Too conservative and you'll be forgotten among the hundreds of other competent painters churning out similar works. The morning assessment reveals a more pressing concern. You're running dangerously low on several essential pigments. The vermilion red made from ground cinnabar is nearly gone, and without it, you can't complete the subtle modeling in Mary's lips and cheeks. Cinnabar mining is dangerous work. The mercury content kills miners regularly, which explains why the pigment costs a small fortune. You make a mental note to visit old Giuseppe at the apothecary, though you know he'll want payment up front, and your credit is already stretched thinner than gold leaf. Your eyes catch a small disaster in the lower right corner, where an apprentice clearly dripped some burnt umber yesterday. The stain has already begun to set into the carefully prepared ground layer, and removing it without damaging the surrounding work will require the delicate touch of a surgeon and the patience of a saint. This is why you can't afford to let apprentices work unsupervised. But you also can't afford to do everything yourself if you want to complete enough commissions to survive. The wooden palette you prepared yesterday evening has developed a skin on several color mixtures, another reminder of oil paint's temperamental nature. You scrape away the dried surface to reveal the still workable paint beneath, salvaging what you can because waste isn't an option when every drop represents precious resources. The palette itself is a work of art in miniature, carefully arranged pools of color that will gradually blend and muddy throughout the day as you mix the precise tones needed for flesh, fabric, and shadow. Light management becomes crucial as you plan the day's work. The north-facing window provides the most consistent illumination, but even that changes subtly as the sun arcs across the sky. You've learned to work on different sections of the painting as the light shifts, tackling fine detail work during the optimal morning hours, and saving broader color applications for later when slight variations in illumination won't matter as much. It's like conducting an orchestra where the instruments are light, pigment, and time, and one wrong note can ruin the entire performance. The canvas itself represents a significant investment that most people don't consider when admiring finished paintings. This particular piece required weeks of preparation, stretching the linen, applying multiple coats of rabbit skin glue, adding the chalk ground layer, and sanding everything smooth. The process is so labor-intensive that many artists maintain several canvases in various stages of preparation, like a pipeline of potential masterpieces waiting for the right commission or inspiration. You notice how the morning light catches the subtle texture of your brushwork in Mary's face, creating tiny shadows that add dimensionality to the painted surface. This is the magic that separates competent craftsmen from true artists, understanding how light interacts with paint texture to create the illusion of three-dimensional form on a flat surface. It's a skill that takes years to develop. The sound of shuffling feet and muffled complaints announces the arrival of your apprentices, and you brace yourself for another day of managing teenagers who think they know everything about art despite barely knowing which end of a brush to hold. Marco stumbles in first, his hair looking like he slept in a haystack, which, knowing his living situation, he probably did. Behind him comes little Tommaso, barely 14, but already showing promise with color mixing, followed by the perpetually distracted Giovanni, whose attention span rivals that of a particularly artistic goldfish. "Master, the rabbit skin glue has gone bad again," Marco announces with the dramatic flair of someone reporting the apocalypse. You resist the urge to remind him that glue goes bad when apprentices forget to cover it properly, because today you need their cooperation more than you need to be right. The delicate dance of managing young assistants requires the diplomatic skills of a papal negotiator and the patience of a monastery monk, neither of which you possess in abundance before your morning bread. You assign tasks with the precision of a military commander, knowing that any confusion will result in wasted materials and missed deadlines. Tommaso gets pigment grinding duty. His steady hands and attention to detail make him perfect for the tedious but crucial work of reducing mineral chunks into the fine powder that becomes paint. Marco, despite his morning appearance, has developed a knack for preparing canvases, so you set him to work on the next commission's ground layer. Giovanni gets the thankless job of cleaning brushes and organizing supplies, partly because it's necessary and partly because it might teach him to pay attention to details. The workshop transforms into a hive of activity as each apprentice settles into their assigned tasks. The rhythmic grinding of pestle against mortar creates a steady percussion as Tommaso works cinnabar into vermilion powder, his technique improving with each session. The sound is oddly soothing, like a meditation bell for artists. though you know the mercury content in that particular pigment is slowly poisoning everyone in the room. Historians still argue whether Renaissance masters understood the health risks of their materials, but the evidence suggests they prioritized artistic results over personal safety, a tradition that continues among artists to this day. You watch Giovanni attempt to clean a brush that's been contaminated with both oil paint and egg tempera, creating a sticky mess that defies conventional cleaning methods. This is exactly the kind of mistake that separates experienced painters from enthusiastic amateurs. Use the turpentine first, then the soap, you instruct, trying to keep the exasperation out of your voice. Oil and water don't mix, remember. He nods earnestly, though you suspect he'll make the same mistake again tomorrow. The apprentice system represents both the strength and weakness of Renaissance art education. These young men learn by doing, absorbing techniques through repetition and observation rather than formal instruction. It's an efficient way to train the next generation of artists, but it also means you're constantly balancing teaching responsibilities with your own creative work. Every moment spent correcting mistakes or explaining basic principles is a moment not spent on the commissions that pay your rent. Marco's canvas preparation reveals his growing understanding of the craft's technical demands. He applies the rabbit skin glue with smooth, even strokes, avoiding the bubbles and streaks that plagued his early attempts. The transformation from clumsy beginner to competent assistant happens gradually, then suddenly, like watching a child learn to walk. You feel a brief surge of pride before remembering that successful apprentices eventually become competitors in Florence's cutthroat art market. The morning light streaming through the workshop windows illuminates the controlled chaos of artistic production. Pigment dust motes dance in the air like colorful snow, while the scents of linseed oil, turpentine, and various binding agents create an olfactory symphony that immediately identifies this space as an artist's domain. Visitors often comment on the smell, not realizing they're experiencing the aromatic signature of Renaissance creativity. Tommaso holds up a small pile of perfectly ground ultramarine, the blue powder catching the light like crushed sapphires. "Is this fine enough, master?" he asks, and you examine his work with the critical eye of someone who's seen too many expensive pigments ruined by inadequate preparation. The particles are uniform and silky, exactly what you need for the Virgin's robes. "Excellent work," you tell him, and his face lights up with the pride that comes from mastering a difficult skill. The apprentice's chatter provides a constant background soundtrack to the morning's work, their conversations ranging from gossip about other workshops to speculation about which masters are receiving the most prestigious commissions. They're like a living intelligence network, gathering information from across Florence's artistic community and bringing it back to your workshop. Through their reports, you learn that Michelangelo is struggling with his David sculpture, that Botticelli is experimenting with new mythological themes, and that several prominent families are planning major artistic commissions for the upcoming festival season. You realize that managing apprentices is as much about psychology as it is about art instruction. Each young man brings his own personality, ambitions, and limitations to the workshop, and your job is to channel their energy productively while avoiding the interpersonal conflicts that can destroy a working environment. It's like conducting an orchestra where half the musicians are. The silk merchant Benedetto Corsini arrives at your workshop with the punctuality of a man who measures time in gold florins. And you can already tell from his expression that today's meeting will test every diplomatic skill you've developed during your artistic career. He sweeps into your space with the confidence of someone who believes money can solve any creative problem, his expensive robes rustling like autumn leaves as he examines your preliminary sketches with the critical eye of a tax collector reviewing suspicious ledgers. The composition lacks grandeur, he announces, gesturing dramatically at your carefully planned biblical scene. You've spent weeks developing a balanced arrangement that tells the story of the Annunciation while incorporating subtle portraits of his family members as various saints and angels. Apparently, subtlety isn't what he had in mind. I want my wife positioned more prominently, perhaps as the Virgin Mary herself, and my sons should be the archangels Gabriel and Michael, not mere background cherubs. You nod thoughtfully while internally calculating how much this change will cost in terms of time, materials, and artistic integrity. Transforming Signora Corsini into the Virgin Mary will require significant adjustments to the composition, not to mention the theological implications of depicting a living person as the Mother of God. But rent is due next week, and your coin purse feels lighter than a hummingbird's conscience. So you smile and discuss the exciting possibilities his suggestions present. The negotiation that follows resembles a chess match played with paintbrushes and florins. Corsini wants maximum family visibility. You want artistic coherence, and both of you want to avoid offending the church authorities who have strong opinions about appropriate religious imagery. Perhaps we could position your wife as Saint Anne, the Virgin's mother, you suggest diplomatically. It maintains the family connection while respecting traditional iconography. He considers this compromise with the intensity of a general planning a military campaign. The discussion of payment terms reveals the complex economics of Renaissance patronage. Corsini offers half the agreed amount up front, with the remainder due upon completion, but he also wants the right to request minor adjustments throughout the process. You've learned from bitter experience that minor adjustments can multiply like rabbits in springtime, turning a straightforward commission into months of unpaid revisions. Any changes beyond the original agreement will require additional compensation, you state firmly, trying to sound confident despite your desperate need for his money. Historians still argue whether Renaissance patrons were sophisticated art lovers or simply wealthy individuals seeking social status through conspicuous cultural consumption. Corsini seems to fall into the latter category, more concerned with impressing his business associates than creating lasting artistic beauty. He wants his painting to shout his family's importance from across any room, while you're trying to create something that won't make future generations question your artistic judgment. The technical challenges of incorporating portrait likenesses into religious scenes require delicate handling of both artistic and diplomatic considerations. Corsini's wife possesses what charitable observers might call distinctive features, and transforming her into a convincing Saint Anne will require all your skills in flattering portraiture. You've developed techniques for subtly improving your subjects' appearances without making the changes so obvious that they feel insulted. But this commission will test those abilities to their limits. I want the painting completed in time for the Feast of the Annunciation, Corsini declares, apparently unaware that quality artwork can't be rushed like a batch of bread. You quickly calculate the timeline in your head, 6 weeks to complete a complex multi-figure composition, assuming no major revisions and perfect working conditions. It's technically possible, but will require working by candlelight and probably sacrificing what little social life you maintain. That's an ambitious schedule, you reply carefully, but certainly achievable with proper planning. The meeting concludes with a handshake that feels more like a business contract than an artistic collaboration, and you watch Corsini depart with mixed feelings of relief and apprehension. His advance payment will solve your immediate financial crisis, but the artistic compromises required to satisfy his vision make your creative soul ache like a bad tooth. This is the eternal tension of commissioned art, balancing personal artistic integrity with the practical need to eat regularly and maintain a roof over your workshop. You return to your easel with Corsini's specifications swirling through your mind like autumn leaves in a windstorm. The original composition, carefully planned to achieve visual harmony and narrative clarity, now needs to accommodate a prominent Saint Anne who bears an unfortunate resemblance to a well-fed merchant's wife. It's like trying to rewrite a beautiful poem to include someone's grocery list. Technically possible but aesthetically challenging. The afternoon light streaming through your workshop windows seems to mock your predicament, illuminating the preliminary sketches that will now require. The morning market assault begins before the sun fully clears Florence's terracotta rooftops, and you navigate the crowded streets with the focused determination of a general leading troops into battle. Except your enemies are inflated prices, questionable quality, and vendors who think artists are easy marks for their most expensive materials. The Mercato Vecchio pulses with the energy of commerce, where everything from exotic spices to religious relics changes hands in a symphony of shouted negotiations and clinking coins. Your first stop is Giuseppe's apothecary shop, a cramped space that smells like a medieval chemistry experiment gone wonderfully wrong. Giuseppe himself resembles a gnome who spent too many years inhaling mysterious vapors, but his knowledge of pigments and binding agents is encyclopedic. Ah, the starving artist returns. He greets you with a grin that reveals more gaps than teeth. What impossible colors do you need today that you cannot afford? His humor stings because it's accurate. You're about to negotiate for materials worth more than most people's monthly income. The ultramarine situation requires delicate diplomacy. Giuseppe's current stock comes from a Venetian trader who claims the lapis lazuli was mined in Afghanistan by monks who blessed each stone individually. Whether this is true or elaborate marketing doesn't matter. What matters is the price, which could feed a small family for a month. I need enough for a virgin's robes, you explain, and Giuseppe's eyebrows rise like startled caterpillars. A small virgin or a life-sized virgin, he asks, because the difference represents several florins and possibly your ability to eat this week. You examine the raw lapis lazuli with the intensity of a jeweler evaluating diamonds, looking for the deep blue color that indicates high quality and the absence of white calcite veins that would dilute the final pigment's intensity. The stone feels cool and heavy in your palm, like holding a piece of captured sky. Historians still argue whether Renaissance painters fully understood the chemical composition of their pigments, but you've learned through expensive trial and error which stones produce the most vibrant colors and which ones fade disappointingly over time. The negotiation dance begins with Giuseppe quoting prices that would make a Medici banker wince, followed by your counteroffers that make him clutch his chest dramatically. "You're killing me," he moans. "My children will starve if I sell at such prices." You point out that he's been saying this for 3 years and his children look remarkably well fed, which earns you a grudging smile and a slight price reduction. The final agreement leaves both of you slightly dissatisfied, which probably means it's fair. Your next challenge involves finding decent brushes, because yesterday's detailed work revealed that several of your finest sable brushes have developed the artistic equivalent of split ends. The brush maker's stall displays an array of options from coarse hog bristle, suitable for rough underpainting, to delicate squirrel hair perfect for the finest details. The best brushes use Kalinsky sable from Siberian weasels, but those cost more than some people's weekly wages and require the kind of care usually reserved for newborn babies. The vendor, a weathered man whose fingers are permanently stained with various dyes, demonstrates each brush's capabilities with the enthusiasm of someone genuinely passionate about his craft. "Feel the spring in this one," he urges, pressing a medium-sized brush into your palm. "Perfect for flesh tones, holds just enough paint without dripping." You test its flexibility and point retention, skills developed through years of learning that cheap brushes are expensive in the long run because they waste pigment and produce inferior results. The morning sun climbs higher as you continue your material hunt, and the market's character shifts with the changing light. Early morning brings the serious buyers, professional craftsmen, wealthy merchant servants, and others who know quality when they see it. Later arrivals often find picked-over selections and inflated prices, which is why successful artists learn to shop like military strategists planning crucial supply runs. A commotion near the spice vendor's stall catches your attention as two customers argue loudly about the authenticity of some imported saffron. The dispute reminds you that material authenticity is a constant concern in your profession. Fake ultramarine made from ground glass and copper compounds can fool casual observers, but produces paintings that fade within years. Your reputation depends on using genuine materials, even when the cost makes your purse weep audibly. The final stop involves visiting the panel maker who supplies your wooden supports, because Corsini's commission will require a larger surface than your current inventory provides. The craftsman shows you several options, explaining the grain patterns and wood density with the expertise of someone who understands that a painting is only as good as its foundation. "Poplar from the hills north of Florence," he explains, running his hand along a smooth panel. "Stable, takes ground beautifully, and won't warp in our climate." The price negotiation here is less dramatic but equally important. A warped panel can destroy months of work faster than a clumsy apprentice with a bucket of turpentine. The Painters Guild meeting convenes in a stone chamber that feels more like a medieval courtroom than an artistic gathering, and you take your seat among Florence's creative elite, while mentally preparing for 2 hours of thinly veiled professional warfare disguised as collegial discussion. Master Lorenzo presides from the head table with the authority of someone who's survived 3 decades of artistic politics, his weathered hands folded over documents that will determine which painters receive the most lucrative commissions, and which ones might find themselves mysteriously excluded from future opportunities. The guild system represents both protection and prison for Renaissance artists. Membership provides legal standing, access to materials, and collective bargaining power. But it also means submitting to regulations that can strangle creative innovation faster than a poorly mixed varnish. Today's agenda includes the perennial debate about apprentice training standards, territorial disputes over workshop locations, and the increasingly contentious issue of artistic techniques that some members consider dangerously experimental. "The question before us," Lorenzo announces with the gravity of a papal decree, concerns young Raffaello's use of oil painting methods in his latest altarpiece. The room erupts in murmurs as members choose sides in what's become a philosophical war between traditional egg tempera techniques and the revolutionary oil methods spreading from Flanders. You shift uncomfortably, knowing your own experiments with oil painting could easily make you the next target of guild scrutiny. Master Benedetto rises to speak, his voice carrying the authority of someone whose family has dominated Florentine painting for 2 generations. "These foreign techniques threaten the integrity of our artistic traditions," he declares, gesturing dramatically. "What happens when these oil paintings begin cracking and fading? Who bears responsibility for disappointing our patrons?" His argument resonates with older guild members who view innovation as a threat to their established methods and market positions. The counterargument comes from younger painters, who have witnessed oil painting's superior luminosity and subtle color gradations. We cannot ignore techniques that produce superior results simply because they originate beyond our borders, argues Master Antonio, whose recent portraits have gained attention precisely because of their oil-painted brilliance. Art must evolve, or we risk becoming irrelevant while painters in other cities surpass our achievements. The generational divide becomes apparent as heads nod on both sides of the chamber. You find yourself caught between loyalty to traditional methods that have served you well and curiosity about techniques that could elevate your work to new levels. The Guild's decision will affect every painter in Florence, potentially restricting access to certain materials or requiring additional licensing for experimental methods. Historians still argue whether Guild regulations helped maintain artistic quality or stifled innovation during the Renaissance. But sitting in this chamber, you feel the weight of institutional conservatism pressing against creative progress. The territorial dispute discussion reveals the cutthroat nature of Florence's artistic economy. Master Giuliano accuses Master Francesco of deliberately establishing his workshop too close to the cathedral, creating unfair competition for religious commissions. The proximity gives him undue advantage in securing church contracts, Giuliano complains, as if artistic success should be determined by geographic lottery rather than talent and business acumen. Francesco responds with barely concealed contempt, pointing out that location means nothing without the skills to deliver quality work. The apprentice training standards debate touches on issues that affect your daily workshop management. Proposed regulations would require formal testing before apprentices can advance to journeyman status, potentially extending training periods and increasing costs for workshop masters. We need standards that ensure competency, argues Master Carlo, whose own apprentices are notorious for their sloppy work. You suspect his support for testing stems from desire to slow competitors' training programs rather than genuine concern for artistic quality. The meeting subtext involves economic anxieties that no one discusses directly, but everyone understands implicitly. Florence's artistic market is becoming increasingly competitive as talented painters arrive from other regions, while wealthy patrons grow more sophisticated in their demands. Guild membership provides some protection against outside competition, but it can't guarantee success in a field where talent, connections, and luck determine who prospers and who struggles to afford basic materials. Master Lorenz calls for a vote on the oil painting question, and you watch colleagues reveal their positions through raised hands and careful abstentions. The decision will affect your own artistic development. Approval means freedom to experiment with new techniques, while rejection could force you to continue working within traditional limitations. The vote splits almost evenly, reflecting the Guild's internal divisions and the broader uncertainty facing Renaissance art. The session concludes with announcements about upcoming commissions and reminders about Guild dues, but the real business happens during informal conversations as members cluster in small groups to discuss private matters. You overhear fragments of negotiations, complaints about difficult patrons, and speculation about which artists are gaining or losing favor with influential families. These whispered exchanges often prove more valuable than the formal proceedings, providing intelligence that can mean the difference between landing a prestigious commission and watching it go to a competitor. Walking home through Florence's narrow streets, you reflect on the Guild's role in your artistic life. The organization provides essential services and professional protection, but it also represents the conservative forces that resist change and innovation. Balancing Guild membership requirements with personal artistic growth requires the diplomatic skills of a courtier, and the patience of a saint, qualities that don't always come naturally to creative personalities focused on pushing boundaries and exploring new possibilities. The preliminary sketches spread across your worktable like a battle plan for artistic conquest, and you prepare to present your vision to the Medici family with the nervous energy of a general about to propose a risky military strategy. The commission represents everything you've worked toward, a chance to paint for Florence's most powerful family, with enough payment to secure your workshop for months and prestige that could attract other wealthy patrons. Unfortunately, it also means convincing them that their youngest daughter Lucrezia would make a convincing Venus, despite her resemblance to a well-fed cherub rather than a goddess of love. The Medici Palazzo intimidates with its massive stone facade and armed guards who examine visitors like potential assassins. But you've learned to project confidence even when your stomach churns with anxiety. Your leather portfolio contains weeks of careful planning, compositional studies, figure drawings, and color notes that demonstrate your ability to transform mythological subjects into paintings that celebrate both classical beauty and contemporary Florentine power. The challenge lies in presenting artistic vision while accommodating the family's desire to see themselves immortalized as divine beings. Lorenzo de' Medici, the younger, receives you in a chamber decorated with enough classical sculptures to stock a Roman museum, his cultured demeanor masking the calculating intelligence that's made his family the unofficial rulers of Florence. "Show me how you plan to capture divine beauty," he commands with the casual authority of someone accustomed to commissioning masterpieces. You spread your sketches across an ornate table, watching his expression for signs of approval or the dreaded frown that could end negotiations before they begin. The composition centers on Venus emerging from the sea, but you've cleverly incorporated portraits of family members as various mythological figures surrounding the goddess. Your daughter Lucrezia as Venus herself, you explain, pointing to the central figure while mentally crossing your fingers. Her natural grace and beauty make her perfect for the role. Lorenzo examines the sketch with the intensity of a jeweler evaluating a precious stone, and you hold your breath while he considers whether artistic flattery can overcome biological reality. The technical challenges of painting mythological subjects require different skills than religious commissions, and you've spent considerable time studying classical texts to ensure iconographic accuracy. Venus must emerge from foam-capped waves, accompanied by wind gods, nymphs, and symbolic elements that educated viewers will recognize and appreciate. The painting needs to work on multiple levels, as visual spectacle, mythological narrative, and subtle political statement about Medici power and cultural sophistication. Historians still argue whether Renaissance mythological paintings were primarily decorative or contained deeper philosophical meanings. But you've learned that successful artists embed multiple layers of interpretation to satisfy different audiences. Scholars can debate symbolic significance while ordinary viewers simply enjoy the beauty, and patrons feel flattered by the intellectual sophistication attributed to their commissions. It's like creating visual poetry that works as both entertainment and high art. The color palette discussion reveals your growing expertise with oil painting techniques that allow for luminous flesh tones and atmospheric effects impossible with traditional tempera. The goddess's skin will glow like pearls, you promise, describing how multiple transparent glazes will create the illusion of divine radiance. Lorenzo nods approvingly, though you suspect he's more interested in ensuring his daughter looks beautiful than understanding technical innovations that could revolutionize European painting. The financial negotiations proceed with the delicate diplomacy required when discussing money with people who could buy and sell your entire neighborhood without noticing the expense. Lorenz offers a generous fee, but expects completion within an ambitious timeline that will require working through religious holidays and possibly sacrificing sleep for the next several months. Art cannot be rushed, you venture diplomatically, but inspiration flows more freely when properly motivated. The resulting compromise satisfies neither party completely, which probably means it's fair. The meeting concludes with handshakes and promises, but you know the real work begins now, transforming sketches into a painting that will either establish your reputation among Florence's elite or demonstrate your limitations in the most public way possible. The Medici Commission represents both opportunity and risk, like gambling your entire career on a single throw of artistic dice. Success could lead to more prestigious commissions and financial security, while failure might force you to return to painting shop signs and religious scenes for provincial churches. Walking home through Florence's crowded streets, you mentally catalog the challenges ahead. The mythological subject matter requires research into classical sources. The multiple portrait likenesses demand diplomatic handling of physical imperfections, and the ambitious scale necessitates careful planning of every compositional element. You've essentially promised to create a masterpiece while making the Medici family look like gods, which requires the artistic skills of Apelles and the diplomatic abilities of a papal ambassador. The afternoon light filtering through your workshop windows illuminates the sketches with golden warmth, and you begin to see how the final painting might capture that same luminous quality. Oil painting techniques will allow for subtle. The portrait session begins with Signora Elisabetta Tornabuoni, positioning herself in the chair with the regal bearing of someone who believes sitting still constitutes a form of artistic collaboration, and you immediately recognize the familiar challenge of capturing both physical likeness and social status while managing a client who has strong opinions about how she should appear to posterity. Her elaborate silk gown, imported from Venice and worth more than most people's annual income, creates a magnificent display of wealth that she clearly expects to dominate the composition. Even though the fabric's complex folds and reflective surfaces will test every technical skill you've developed over years of portrait painting, the three-quarter pose you've chosen follows the successful formula established by masters like Leonardo, allowing for direct engagement between subject and viewer, while providing opportunities to display the sitter's fine clothing and jewelry. Signora Tornabuoni's position near the window takes advantage of the soft northern light that Renaissance painters prize for its consistency and flattering qualities. Though managing the illumination throughout a multi-hour session requires constant adjustment as the sun moves across the sky and clouds alter the light's character. I want to appear dignified but approachable, she instructs with the confidence of someone accustomed to having her preferences accommodated. And please ensure my hands look elegant. They're my finest feature. You nod diplomatically while privately noting that her hands, while certainly well-maintained, show the inevitable signs of age that will require subtle artistic interpretation to achieve the desired elegance. The challenge of portrait painting lies precisely in this balance between honest representation and flattering idealization, walking the fine line between accuracy and diplomacy. The technical demands of oil painting allow for the subtle modeling and luminous effects that make Renaissance portraits seem to glow with inner life. But they also require patience, as each layer must dry before the next can be applied to. You begin with thin washes of color to establish the basic flesh tones, building up the modeling gradually through multiple transparent glazes that create depth and luminosity, impossible with traditional tempera techniques. The process demands both technical precision and artistic sensitivity, as each brushstroke contributes to the overall impression of living, breathing humanity. Signora Tornabuoni's conversation reveals the complex social dynamics that surround Renaissance portraiture, where paintings serve as both artistic achievements and political statements about family status and cultural sophistication. "My husband wants the portrait to hang in our main reception hall," she explains, "where it will be seen by all our important visitors. The painting must therefore function as both personal memorial and public advertisement, demonstrating the family's wealth, taste, and connections to Florence's artistic community." The psychological aspects of portraiture require reading your subject's personality and translating those insights into visual elements that suggest character and temperament. Signora Tornabuoni possesses the self-assured bearing of someone born into privilege, but you also detect hints of intelligence and perhaps subtle melancholy that could add depth to the portrait's emotional resonance. Historians still argue whether Renaissance portraits were primarily concerned with external appearance or attempted to capture inner psychology. But you've learned that the most successful paintings somehow manage to suggest both physical presence and spiritual essence. The session's rhythm alternates between periods of intense concentration when you work on critical details like the eyes and mouth, and moments of lighter conversation that help maintain your subject's cooperation during the lengthy process. Portrait painting requires not just artistic skill, but also the interpersonal abilities of a diplomat, keeping clients comfortable and engaged while managing their expectations about how they'll appear in the finished work. It's like being a therapist who works with brushes instead of words. The afternoon light gradually shifts, requiring adjustments to both your subject's position and your own painting technique to maintain consistency in the illumination effects. You've learned to work systematically, completing sections of the painting under optimal lighting conditions, rather than trying to work on the entire surface simultaneously. The face receives priority during the best light, while clothing and background elements can be developed during less ideal conditions, or even by candlelight if necessary. Signora Tornabuoni's jewelry presents particular technical challenges, as the gold and precious stones must be rendered with enough accuracy to demonstrate their value, while avoiding the trap of making them more prominent than the human subject. Renaissance portrait conventions demand that accessories enhance rather than overwhelm the sitter's presence, requiring careful balance between material display and personal dignity. The pearl necklace alone represents weeks of your income, but in the painting it must serve the composition rather than dominating it. The session concludes with both parties feeling cautiously optimistic about the portrait's progress, though you know that client satisfaction often depends more on flattering representation than artistic achievement. Signora Tornabuoni examines the day's work with the critical eye of someone who understands that this painting will represent her to future generations. While you mentally catalog the adjustments needed to achieve the perfect balance between likeness and idealization that defines successful Renaissance portraiture. The experimental oil techniques you've been secretly developing could revolutionize your artistic practice or completely destroy several months' worth of expensive materials. And you approach today's testing session with the nervous excitement of an alchemist attempting to transmute base metals into gold. Your private workshop corner, hidden from apprentices' curious eyes and clients' conservative expectations, contains small wooden panels prepared specifically for technical experimentation, a luxury you can barely afford but consider essential for artistic growth in an era when innovation separates successful masters from competent craftsmen. The Flemish oil painting methods that have been filtering into Italy promise luminous effects and subtle color gradations impossible with traditional egg tempera. But mastering these techniques requires understanding chemistry as much as artistry too. You've acquired samples of walnut oil, linseed oil, and various resins through careful negotiations with apothecaries and foreign merchants, each ingredient representing a significant investment in your artistic future. The challenge lies in discovering the proper proportions and application methods that will produce stable, long-lasting results rather than expensive disasters. Your first experiment involves mixing ultramarine blue with different oil mediums to test their drying properties and color intensity. The lapis lazuli pigment, ground to powder at considerable expense, must be combined with binding agents that will hold the color particles in suspension while allowing the paint to flow smoothly from your brush. Too much oil creates a mixture that never properly dries, while too little results in a chalky, unstable surface that will crack and flake within years. The grinding process itself requires techniques different from tempera preparation, as oil-based paints demand more thorough mixing to achieve proper consistency and prevent separation. You work the pigment and medium together on a marble slab with a glass muller, feeling the texture change as the particles become fully incorporated. The resulting paint has a richness and depth that makes your previous tempera work seem flat by comparison, but you know that appearance means nothing if the technique proves unstable over time. Layering experiments reveal oil painting's greatest advantage: the ability to work wet into wet or apply transparent glazes over dried underlayers to achieve effects impossible with faster drying mediums. You test various approaches: direct painting, where colors are mixed and applied in single sessions, and indirect methods involving multiple layers of glazes that build up luminous depth gradually. Each approach requires different timing and technique, like learning to speak entirely new artistic languages. The drying time variations between different pigments create both opportunities and challenges that require careful planning of your painting sequence. Some colors dry within hours, while others remain workable for days, allowing for subtle blending and modeling effects that give Renaissance oil paintings their characteristic lifelike quality. But this also means that mistakes can't be quickly corrected, and contamination between layers can create muddy, lifeless results that waste expensive materials and valuable time. Historians still argue whether Italian painters developed oil techniques independently or learned them from Northern European masters. But sitting in your workshop with paint-stained fingers, you're more concerned with practical results than art historical debates too. The techniques work. That much is clear from the luminous effects you're achieving. But adapting them to Italian artistic traditions and climate conditions requires extensive experimentation that feels like artistic research conducted at considerable personal risk. The sfumato effects that you've admired in Leonardo's work become possible through careful manipulation of oil paint's slow-drying properties, allowing for the subtle gradations that make painted forms seem to emerge from shadow like living beings too. You practice on small panels, building up flesh tones through multiple transparent layers that create the illusion of skin's natural translucency. The technique demands patience and precise timing, as each layer must reach the proper consistency before the next can be applied. Color mixing possibilities expand dramatically with oil mediums, as pigments can be combined in ways that create entirely new hues and effects. You experiment with warm and cool versions of the same basic colors, discovering how different oil preparations affect not just the paint's handling properties, but also its final appearance. The vermilion red mixed with walnut oil produces different effects than the same pigment combined with linseed oil, opening up possibilities for subtle color variations that could enhance your portrait work significantly. The afternoon's experiments yield both successes and failures, teaching you as much from the disasters as from the triumphs. Several test panels will need to be scraped clean and reused, their failed experiments serving as expensive lessons in what not to attempt on actual commissions. But the successful tests reveal possibilities that make the risks worthwhile. Luminous flesh tones, atmospheric depth, and subtle color effects that could elevate your work to new levels of sophistication and beauty. Cleaning your brushes and tools after oil painting experiments requires different solvents and more thorough procedures than tempera work, adding complexity and expense to your daily routine. But as you examine the day's successful tests in the fading afternoon light, you realize that mastering these techniques could transform your artistic practice from competent craftsmanship into something approaching the innovations that are reshaping European painting. The afternoon teaching session transforms your workshop into a Renaissance art academy as you attempt to demonstrate the mysteries of sfumato to 3 apprentices, whose understanding of subtle artistic effects currently ranks somewhere between non-existent and dangerously overconfident. And you find yourself questioning whether artistic knowledge can actually be transmitted through instruction, or if genius simply emerges through divine inspiration and years of expensive mistakes. The technique that Leonardo has made famous requires a delicate touch and deep understanding of how light, shadow, and color interact to create the illusion of three-dimensional form, concepts that seem to baffle young minds more interested in completing tasks quickly than achieving artistic perfection. Marco attempts to blend flesh tones with the subtlety of someone mixing mortar, his heavy-handed approach creating harsh transitions that make the painted face look like it's suffering from some exotic skin condition. Lighter touch, you instruct for the 15th time, demonstrating how to barely caress the paint surface with a soft brush loaded with just enough medium to allow colors to flow together seamlessly too. The sfumato technique demands patience and restraint, qualities not typically associated with teenage apprentices eager to prove their competence through visible progress rather than invisible refinement. Tommaso shows more promise, his natural sensitivity translating into gentler brushwork that begins to achieve the subtle gradations that make painted forms seem to breathe with life. You guide his hand as he works on a practice panel, feeling the resistance in his muscles as he fights the urge to press harder and work faster. Think of it as caressing smoke, you suggest, borrowing Leonardo's own description of the technique that takes its name from the Italian word for evaporated or vanished too. The metaphor seems to resonate, and his next attempts show improvement that gives you hope for his artistic future. Giovanni, predictably, treats the demonstration as an opportunity to experiment with his own interpretations of proper technique, creating effects that might charitably be described as innovative, if they weren't so obviously wrong. His attempts at subtle modeling produce muddy, overworked surfaces that demonstrate exactly what happens when enthusiasm exceeds understanding. You resist the urge to scrape away his work and start over, knowing that learning requires making mistakes, even expensive ones that waste precious pigments and prepared panels. The theoretical aspects of sfumato prove as challenging to explain as the practical techniques, requiring discussions of how human vision actually works and why sharp outlines rarely exist in nature. Look at my face, you instruct, positioning yourself in the workshop's north light. Where exactly does my cheek end and the shadow begin? The apprentices squint and study, gradually recognizing that the transitions they see are gradual rather than abrupt, a revelation that should inform their painting technique if they can remember it long enough to apply the knowledge. The afternoon light provides perfect conditions for demonstrating how sfumato affects change under different illumination, showing how successful modeling must account for varying viewing conditions. What appears perfectly blended in strong directional light might look flat and lifeless under the diffused illumination of an interior space, requiring artists to consider how their paintings will be displayed and viewed. This level of technical sophistication separates master painters from competent craftsmen, though explaining such subtleties to apprentices sometimes feels like describing color to blind men. Historians still argue whether sfumato represents a conscious artistic innovation or simply the natural result of oil painting's slow-drying properties. But in your workshop, theoretical debates matter less than practical results too. The technique works. Leonardo's portraits prove that. But teaching it requires breaking down intuitive processes into steps that can be learned and practiced. It's like trying to explain how to breathe or walk, activities that seem simple until you attempt to analyze their component parts. The psychological aspects of teaching art reveal themselves as you watch each apprentice struggle with concepts that challenge their assumptions about how painting should work. Traditional tempera techniques reward decisive brushwork and clear definition, while sfumato demands restraint and acceptance of ambiguity. The mental adjustment proves as difficult as the physical technique, requiring students to embrace uncertainty and trust in gradual processes rather than immediate results. Practice exercises reveal each apprentice's natural inclinations and limitations, information that helps you tailor instruction to individual needs and capabilities. Marco's heavy-handed approach might suit him for large-scale decorative work, while Tommaso's sensitivity could develop into sophisticated portrait skills. Giovanni's experimental nature, properly channeled, might lead to genuine innovation, though it currently produces more disasters than discoveries. The session concludes with mixed results that reflect the complex nature of artistic education. Some progress, some setbacks, and the gradual accumulation of knowledge that eventually transforms enthusiastic beginners into competent practitioners. You examine their practice panels with the critical eye of someone who understands that today's crude attempts might contain the seeds of tomorrow's masterpieces. Assuming the apprentices develop the patience and dedication required to master techniques that took you years to understand. The late afternoon light streaming through your workshop windows illuminates paint-stained hands and concentrated faces, creating a scene that captures the essence of Renaissance artistic education. Master and students united in the pursuit of beauty through technical mastery and creative vision. Whether these particular apprentices will achieve artistic greatness remains uncertain. The evening entertainment begins as potential patrons arrive at your workshop with the expectation of witnessing artistic genius in action, and you transform from paint-stained craftsman into Renaissance cultural ambassador, serving wine that costs more than your weekly food budget while charming wealthy merchants and minor nobility who possess the financial resources to commission the masterpieces that could secure your artistic legacy. The carefully orchestrated evening represents equal parts art exhibition, social networking, and sales presentation, requiring performance skills that weren't covered in your artistic training, but prove essential for survival in Florence's competitive cultural marketplace. Your workshop, hastily cleaned and arranged to showcase your finest completed works alongside promising sketches and technical demonstrations, becomes a stage where artistic vision meets commercial reality. Candles provide flattering illumination that makes your paintings glow with warm luminosity, while concealing any minor imperfections that might concern potential clients. The strategic placement of expensive pigments and fine brushes suggests both technical competence and access to premium materials. Important considerations for patrons who want their commissions to reflect their social status through artistic quality. Signor Alessandro Strozzi examines your portrait work with the calculating gaze of someone evaluating investment opportunities, rather than appreciating artistic beauty. His questions focusing more on durability and prestige value than aesthetic achievement. How long will the colors remain vibrant? He inquires, running his fingers near but not quite touching a recently completed panel. My family's reputation depends on commissioning works that will honor our name for generations. You explain oil painting's superior longevity compared to tempera, while mentally noting his emphasis on family legacy over personal artistic satisfaction. The wine flows freely as conversations shift between artistic techniques, political gossip, and the subtle negotiations that determine which painters receive the most lucrative commissions. You've learned to read the social dynamics that govern these gatherings. Who defers to whom, which families are currently ascendant, and how artistic preferences reflect broader political alignments. Supporting the wrong artistic style can sometimes indicate dangerous political sympathies, making aesthetic choices surprisingly consequential in Renaissance Florence's charged atmosphere. Madonna Lucrezia Tornabuoni, sister to your portrait client, arrives with an entourage that includes several other wealthy women seeking artistic services for their own family projects. The female patronage network operates through different channels than male-dominated guild politics, often focusing on religious commissions, private devotional works, and the kind of intimate portraiture that captures family relationships rather than public personas. These women possess significant influence over artistic commissions, though they exercise it through indirect methods that require careful navigation. The demonstration of painting techniques serves both educational and promotional purposes, showing potential clients the skill and knowledge that justify your fees, while revealing the complexity involved in creating works they might otherwise take for granted. You mix pigments with theatrical flair, explaining the exotic origins of various colors and their symbolic significance in religious and mythological contexts. The ultramarine blue's connection to the Virgin Mary's robes, the gold leaf's representation of divine light, and the vermilion red's association with martyrdom and passion. Each pigment carries cultural meaning that educated patrons appreciate and expect their artists to understand. Conversations reveal the intricate web of relationships that determine artistic success in Renaissance Florence, where family connections, guild memberships, and political alignments influence commission opportunities as much as artistic talent. You listen carefully to gossip about which families are planning major projects, which artists are gaining or losing favor, and how recent political developments might affect the cultural patronage that sustains your profession. Information gathering becomes as important as wine serving in these social situations. The evening's highlight involves unveiling preliminary sketches for a major altarpiece commission, allowing potential collaborators to see your compositional skills and understand the scope of projects you're capable of undertaking. The drawings demonstrate your ability to organize complex multi-figure scenes while maintaining narrative clarity and visual impact, skills that separate competent portraitists from masters capable of handling the most prestigious religious and mythological commissions that define artistic reputations. Signor Giovanni Rucellai expresses interest in commissioning a series of panels depicting classical themes for his new palazzo's reception rooms, a project that would provide months of steady income, while allowing you to explore mythological subjects that showcase technical virtuosity and humanist learning. The negotiation involves not just artistic and financial considerations, but also questions of iconographic appropriateness and the subtle political messages that classical subjects can convey about their patrons' cultural sophistication and philosophical alignments. The social dynamics of artistic patronage reveal themselves as the evening progresses, with potential clients evaluating not just your artistic abilities, but also your social connections, cultural knowledge, and ability to enhance their own reputations through association. Commissioning art from the right painter becomes a form of cultural investment that reflects the patron's taste, wealth, and position within Florence's complex social hierarchy. Your success depends on convincing these influential individuals that supporting your work will advance their own social and cultural objectives. The evening concludes with promises, tentative agreements, and the kind of diplomatic commitments that might or might not result in actual commissions, depending on factors ranging from political developments to family financial situations. You've planted seeds that could bloom into major projects, but Renaissance patronage operates on timescales that require patience and the ability to maintain multiple potential opportunities simultaneously, while avoiding commitments that might conflict with more lucrative possibilities. The candlelight flickers across your easel as Florence settles into its nighttime rhythm, and you finally escape the demands of clients, apprentices, and guild politics to pursue the artistic vision that burns within your soul like a sacred flame. This is the hour when commercial necessity yields to creative passion, when you can paint what you see rather than what others want to buy, exploring techniques and subjects that might scandalize patrons, but feed the artistic hunger that drove you to this profession, despite its financial uncertainties and social complications. Your current personal project, hidden behind a cloth whenever visitors enter the workshop, depicts a scene that would raise eyebrows among Florence's conservative religious authorities. A classical Venus emerging from her bath, painted with the kind of sensual realism that celebrates human beauty rather than divine spirituality. The subject matter represents both artistic rebellion and technical challenge, requiring you to master flesh tones and anatomical accuracy that go far beyond the stylized conventions of traditional religious art. Working by candlelight adds an element of secrecy that makes the creative process feel deliciously transgressive. The oil painting techniques you've been developing prove their worth during these nocturnal sessions, as the medium's slow-drying properties allow for the kind of subtle modeling and atmospheric effects that make painted figures seem to breathe with life. Each brushstroke builds upon previous layers, creating depth and luminosity that would be impossible with traditional tempera methods. The Venus's skin seems to glow from within, an effect achieved through multiple transparent glazes that capture the way candlelight caresses living flesh. The freedom to experiment without client oversight unleashes creative possibilities that daylight hours rarely permit, allowing you to explore color combinations and compositional arrangements that might be considered too radical for commissioned works. Tonight you're testing a revolutionary approach to background landscapes, using atmospheric perspective to create the illusion of infinite depth behind your figure. The technique involves gradually cooling and lightening colors as they recede into the distance, mimicking the way human vision actually perceives distant objects through layers of atmospheric haze. The psychological satisfaction of working for yourself rather than demanding patrons provides emotional nourishment that sustains you through the commercial compromises required for survival. This Venus represents your true artistic voice, unfiltered by client preferences or religious restrictions, expressing the humanist ideals that are reshaping Renaissance culture. The painting celebrates physical beauty as a reflection of divine creation, a philosophical position that would horrify medieval theologians, but increasingly finds acceptance among educated Florentines. Historians still argue whether Renaissance artists were primarily craftsmen serving client needs or independent creators pursuing personal vision. But sitting alone in your candlelit workshop, you feel the tension between these roles in your very bones. The commercial work pays for materials and rent, but these private projects feed your artistic soul and push your technical abilities into unexplored territory. Without both aspects, you would be either a starving visionary or a prosperous hack, neither outcome particularly appealing. The technical challenges of painting by candlelight require adaptations that test your understanding of color relationships and value structures. Colors that appear perfectly balanced in natural light can look completely different under the warm, flickering illumination of candles, forcing you to develop an intuitive understanding of how different light sources affect painted surfaces. The experience teaches lessons about color temperature and atmospheric effects that prove invaluable when working on commissioned pieces viewed under various lighting conditions. The Venus's pose, inspired by classical sculptures you've studied in private collections, represents a synthesis of ancient artistic ideals and contemporary technical innovations. Renaissance artists are rediscovering the anatomical knowledge and aesthetic principles that made Greek and Roman art so compelling. But you're applying this classical wisdom using painting techniques that surpass anything achieved by ancient masters. The combination creates possibilities for artistic expression that feel both timeless and revolutionary. The night hours provide mental space for the kind of creative problem-solving that produces artistic breakthroughs, allowing your mind to wander through possibilities without the constant interruptions that characterize daytime workshop activity. You find yourself discovering solutions to technical challenges that have puzzled you for weeks, as if the quiet darkness unlocks mental processes that remain hidden during busier periods. The Venus's hair, which has resisted your attempts to achieve convincing texture and movement, suddenly yields to a new approach involving dry brush techniques over carefully prepared underlayers. The personal satisfaction of creating beauty for its own sake, without consideration of market demands or client preferences, reminds you why you chose this difficult profession despite its financial uncertainties and social complications. The Venus will probably never be publicly displayed. The subject matter is too controversial for most potential venues, but the process of creating her teaches lessons and develops skills that will enhance all your future work. Art created purely for artistic reasons often proves more valuable than commercial commissions in advancing technical abilities and creative vision. The candles burn lower as you work, their diminishing light creating an urgency that focuses your attention. The harsh morning light illuminating your coin purse reveals the brutal mathematics of artistic survival in Renaissance Florence, where the gap between your expenses and income widens like a crack in poorly prepared gesso, threatening to swallow your dreams of artistic greatness, along with your ability to afford basic necessities like bread, wine, and the pigments that make your profession possible. You count the remaining florins with the grim precision of a general calculating supplies before a siege, knowing that each coin represents not just purchasing power but time. Time to create, time to experiment, time to develop the artistic vision that could elevate you from struggling craftsman to celebrated master. The rent for your workshop consumes nearly half your monthly income, a necessary expense that provides both workspace and professional credibility, but leaves precious little for the materials that transform artistic vision into painted reality. Your landlord, a prosperous wool merchant with no appreciation for artistic temperament, expects payment with the regularity of church bells, regardless of whether your current commissions have reached completion or your patrons have honored their financial commitments. The threat of eviction hovers over every creative decision, adding pressure that can either inspire desperate brilliance or paralyze artistic confidence. The cost of quality pigments represents your profession's cruelest irony. The materials needed to create masterpieces cost more than most people earn in months, yet without them, your paintings will fade, crack, or simply fail to achieve the visual impact that attracts wealthy patrons. Ultramarine blue alone could bankrupt a small workshop, while gold leaf for illuminated details costs more per sheet than many families spend on food in a week. You've learned to stretch expensive colors by mixing them with cheaper alternatives, but such economies require technical knowledge that took years to develop and still produce inferior results compared to pure pigments. The irregular nature of artistic income creates financial planning challenges that would challenge a Medici banker. As commissions arrive unpredictably, and payments often lag months behind completion, wealthy patrons operate on schedules that prioritize their convenience over your cash flow, treating artists like servants who should be grateful for any payment regardless of timing. You've learned to negotiate partial payments and maintain multiple projects simultaneously. But the system still leaves you vulnerable to the kind of financial crises that can destroy artistic careers overnight. Food expenses reveal the daily compromises required to sustain both body and artistic practice, as money spent on decent meals means less available for the materials that could advance your career. You've developed a connoisseur's appreciation for the cheapest bread, watered wine, and questionable cheese that constitute your regular diet, saving more expensive foods for occasions when potential patrons visit your workshop. The irony of creating beauty while living in relative poverty isn't lost on you, though it's a reality shared by most artists who haven't achieved the rare combination of talent, connections, and luck that defines commercial success. The hidden costs of artistic practice extend far beyond obvious expenses like pigments and canvas, encompassing everything from brush maintenance to workshop heating during Florence's surprisingly cold winters, candles for evening work, charcoal for preliminary sketches, and the various oils and solvents required for different techniques all drain your resources in ways that clients never consider when negotiating fees. Even cleaning supplies represent significant expenses when you're working with materials that require specialized solvents and careful handling to prevent contamination. Historians still argue whether Renaissance artists were primarily motivated by artistic vision or financial necessity. But sitting in your workshop with empty pockets and half-finished commissions, you understand that survival and creativity are inextricably linked. The pressure to earn money can compromise artistic integrity, but without financial stability, there's no opportunity to develop the skills and reputation that enable true artistic freedom. The challenge lies in balancing commercial viability with creative growth, accepting necessary compromises while protecting the core vision that defines your artistic identity. The guild dues and professional expenses required to maintain your legal standing as a painter add another layer of financial burden that clients rarely consider when questioning your fees. Membership in the Painters Guild provides essential legal protections and access to certain materials, but it also requires regular payments that strain budgets already stretched by basic survival needs. Professional development, studying with other masters, traveling to see important works, acquiring new techniques, represents investments in your artistic future that must compete with immediate survival requirements. The mathematics of artistic pricing reveals the impossible calculations required to balance fair compensation with market realities. As clients expect masterpiece quality at craftsman prices, while artists struggle to cover costs that include not just materials and time, but also years of training and the accumulated knowledge that makes professional competence possible. You've learned to present fees confidently while internally calculating whether the proposed payment will cover expenses and provide enough profit to sustain your workshop until the next commission arrives. The economic vulnerability of artistic careers becomes apparent during Florence's periodic political upheavals, when wealthy patrons redirect their resources toward more immediate concerns than cultural patronage. Wars, trade disruptions, and political instability can eliminate the luxury spending that sustains artistic workshops, forcing painters to seek alternative income sources or face the prospect of abandoning their profession entirely. The precarious nature of artistic income makes long-term planning nearly impossible and retirement a luxury few artists can afford. The evening's financial review concludes with the sobering realization that artistic success requires not just creative talent, but also business acumen, political awareness, and the kind of financial discipline that allows for strategic investments in materials and professional development. You close your account books with mixed feelings, grateful for the commissions that provide current income, while anxious about the uncertain future that defines every artist's career in Renaissance. Florence's competitive and unpredictable. The weight of artistic legacy presses against your consciousness like the heavy silence of a cathedral at midnight, and you find yourself contemplating whether future generations will remember your name among the pantheon of Renaissance masters, or if your paintings will gather dust in forgotten corners, attributed to unknown artists by scholars who never learned to recognize your distinctive brushwork and compositional innovations. The question haunts every serious artist in Florence, where the competition for immortality is as fierce as the struggle for daily survival, and where the difference between lasting fame and historical obscurity often depends on factors beyond artistic merit, political connections, fortunate timing, and the capricious nature of cultural memory. Your studio walls display the accumulated work of years spent developing a personal style that balances technical innovation with market demands. Each painting representing not just completed commissions, but steps in an artistic journey that you hope leads toward something approaching greatness. The portraits capture not just physical likenesses, but psychological insights that reveal your growing understanding of human nature, while the religious works demonstrate your ability to breathe new life into traditional subjects through subtle innovations in composition and technique. Whether these achievements will prove sufficient to secure your place in art history remains an open question that keeps you awake during long nights when creative ambition wrestles with practical concerns. The examples of artistic immortality that surround you in Florence provide both inspiration and intimidation. As you walk daily past works by masters whose names have become synonymous with artistic excellence, Giotto's revolutionary naturalism transformed painting a century ago, while contemporary giants like Leonardo and Michelangelo are already achieving the kind of legendary status that ensures their work will be studied and celebrated for centuries. The challenge lies in finding your own path to significance in an era when artistic innovation happens at breathtaking speed and competition for patronage reaches levels of intensity that would make Roman gladiators nervous. The technical innovations you've developed through years of experimentation with oil painting techniques represent your most likely contribution to art history's ongoing narrative. As future painters will build upon the methods you're helping to establish in Italian workshops. Your understanding of atmospheric perspective, flesh tone modeling, and the subtle psychological effects achievable through careful attention to facial expression and gesture could influence artistic development for generations. Assuming your knowledge survives the transition from personal practice to documented technique that other artists can learn and adapt, the philosophical questions surrounding artistic legacy extend beyond personal ambition to encompass broader issues about art's role in human culture and the mechanisms by which creative achievements survive the passage of time. Your paintings attempt to capture not just contemporary appearances, but timeless aspects of human experience that will remain relevant long after current political situations and social customs have faded into historical curiosity. The challenge lies in creating works that speak to universal human concerns, while remaining grounded in the specific cultural context that gives them meaning and emotional resonance. Historians still argue whether artistic greatness is determined by contemporary recognition or posthumous reevaluation. But you've observed how political changes and shifting cultural values can dramatically alter artistic reputations within a single generation. Masters who seemed destined for immortality can fade into obscurity when their style falls out of fashion, while previously overlooked artists sometimes achieve recognition decades after their deaths, when new generations discover qualities that earlier viewers missed or undervalued. The unpredictability of artistic legacy makes current success an unreliable predictor of historical significance. The practical steps you can take to influence your artistic legacy involve not just creating excellent work, but also cultivating relationships with influential patrons, documenting your techniques for future artists, and positioning your paintings in locations where they're likely to survive political upheavals and natural disasters. The most beautiful painting in the world contributes nothing to art history if it's destroyed by fire, flood, or warfare, making preservation considerations as important as aesthetic achievement in determining which works survive to influence future generations. The role of written documentation in preserving artistic knowledge becomes apparent as you consider how to transmit your technical innovations to future practitioners, since visual examples alone may not convey the subtle procedural knowledge that makes certain effects possible. Your experiments with oil painting techniques could benefit countless future artists if properly recorded, but the demands of daily survival leave little time for the kind of systematic documentation that would ensure your methods survive your own lifetime. The tension between creating art and preserving artistic knowledge represents another challenge in the complex equation of artistic legacy. The emotional aspects of contemplating artistic mortality reveal themselves as you examine your life's work with the critical perspective that comes from understanding how quickly artistic fashions change and reputations rise or fall. The paintings that seem most significant to you might not be the ones that future generations find most compelling, while works you consider minor achievements could prove to be your most influential contributions to art history's development. The disconnect between artistic intention and historical reception adds uncertainty to any attempt at predicting or controlling your legacy. The evening's contemplation concludes with the recognition that artistic legacy ultimately depends on factors beyond any individual artist's control. The survival of physical works, the development of art historical scholarship, and the cultural values that determine which aspects of the past seem worth preserving and studying. Your responsibility lies in creating the best work possible under current circumstances, while hoping that future generations will. The midnight hour transforms your workshop into a sanctuary of creative solitude, where the day's commercial demands finally yield to the pure artistic impulse that first drew you to this demanding profession. And you move through the familiar space with the quiet reverence of a monk performing sacred rituals, cleaning brushes with the same careful attention you once reserved for mixing the most expensive pigments. The candles cast dancing shadows that animate your paintings, making the faces seem to watch your nocturnal preparations, with the knowing expressions of old friends who understand the sacrifices required to transform raw materials into lasting beauty through the alchemy of skill, vision, and stubborn persistence. The ritual of preparing tomorrow's palette becomes a meditation on the infinite possibilities contained within simple combinations of pigment and oil, each color representing not just a tool for representation, but a gateway to emotional expression and visual poetry. You arrange the colors with the precision of a general positioning troops before battle, the warm earth tones that will model flesh and fabric, the brilliant blues that capture sky and divine robes, the subtle grays that create atmospheric depth and suggest the mysterious spaces between light and shadow. Tomorrow's work begins tonight with these careful preparations that ensure your creative energy flows unimpeded by technical obstacles. The workshop's nighttime silence allows you to hear the subtle sounds that daylight activity usually masks. The gentle creak of wooden panels adjusting to temperature changes, the soft whisper of settling pigment dust, and the almost inaudible tick of cooling candle wax as it hardens into sculptural forms that will be scraped away and reused tomorrow. These sounds create a symphony of artistic process that connects you to centuries of painters who have worked through similar nights, pursuing similar dreams of creating something beautiful and lasting in a world that often seems indifferent to aesthetic achievement. Your hands, stained with the accumulated evidence of countless painting sessions, move with the unconscious competence that comes from years of repetitive practice, each gesture refined through thousands of repetitions until technique becomes as natural as breathing. The brush cleaning process, performed with the kind of thorough attention that preserves expensive tools and prevents color contamination, represents both practical necessity and symbolic purification, preparing for tomorrow's creative work by clearing away today's accumulated compromises and commercial obligations. The paintings surrounding you in various stages of completion create a visual autobiography that chronicles your artistic development from enthusiastic apprentice to competent master, each work marking progress in technical skill and creative understanding. The early pieces, with their tentative brushwork and conventional compositions, seem like letters from a younger self who possessed more enthusiasm than knowledge, while recent works demonstrate the confidence that comes from mastering difficult techniques and developing a personal artistic voice that balances innovation with respect for established traditions. The city beyond your workshop windows sleeps under a canopy of stars that have witnessed the rise and fall of countless artistic careers, their distant light providing perspective on the temporal nature of human achievement and the eternal cycles that connect individual creative efforts to the broader patterns of cultural development. Florence's narrow streets, which bustled with commercial activity just hours ago, now offer the kind of peaceful silence that allows for deep contemplation of artistic purpose and the mysterious processes by which inspiration transforms into tangible beauty. The tools of your trade, cleaned and organized for tomorrow's work, represent the accumulated wisdom of generations of artists who have refined these simple implements into instruments capable of capturing the full range of human experience. Each brush, palette knife, and grinding stone carries the invisible history of countless masterpieces, their surfaces worn smooth by the hands of painters who faced similar challenges and pursued similar dreams of creating art that would outlast their own brief lives. Historians still argue whether Renaissance artists were primarily motivated by spiritual calling or practical necessity. But in the quiet sanctuary of your midnight workshop, such distinctions seem less important than the simple fact of creative persistence, the daily choice to continue pursuing beauty despite financial uncertainty, social challenges, and the constant pressure to compromise artistic vision for commercial viability. The act of painting becomes its own justification, requiring no external validation beyond the satisfaction of transforming blank surfaces into windows that reveal new ways of seeing and understanding the world. The final preparations complete, you extinguish the working candles one by one, leaving only a single flame to guide your way to the corner where sleep awaits. The workshop settles into darkness that seems pregnant with tomorrow's possibilities, new commissions to begin, technical problems to solve, and the ongoing challenge of balancing artistic integrity with practical survival in Florence's demanding cultural marketplace. The rhythm of artistic life continues, measured not in hours or days but in the gradual accumulation of skill, knowledge, and creative vision that defines a painter's journey from apprentice to master. The soft whisper of your footsteps on worn floorboards creates a gentle percussion that fades into silence as you settle into the simple bed that occupies your workshop's corner, your dreams already beginning to form around tomorrow's artistic challenges, and the eternal hope that your next painting might be the one that achieves the perfect synthesis of technical mastery and creative vision that transforms competent craftsmanship into lasting art. The city sleeps around you, but your artistic spirit remains alert, processing the day's experiences and preparing for another dawn that will bring fresh opportunities to pursue the beautiful impossibility of capturing life's essence in pigment and oil. Sleep comes gradually, like the slow drying of a carefully applied glaze. The darkness deepens around your workshop as Florence settles into its deepest sleep, and you drift toward dreams filled with luminous colors and perfect compositions that exist only in the realm of artistic imagination. Your breathing slows and deepens, matching the gentle rhythm of a city at rest, while your mind processes the day's accumulated experiences. The weight of brushes in your hand, the subtle resistance of paint against canvas, the endless dance between vision and technique that defines your chosen profession. In the distance, church bells mark the passage of time with their ancient bronze voices, their sound carrying across sleeping rooftops to remind you that art exists within the larger rhythms of human life, birth and death, celebration and mourning, the eternal cycles that give meaning to individual creative efforts. Your paintings, standing silent in the darkness, wait patiently for tomorrow's light to reveal their colors and bring them back to life, like sleeping beauties awaiting the kiss of dawn. The workshop's familiar scents, linseed oil, ground pigments, and the woody smell of prepared panels, create an olfactory lullaby that speaks of dedication, craft, and the thousands of small decisions that transform artistic dreams into painted reality. These are the perfumes of creation, as distinctive and meaningful to you as the incense of cathedrals, or the salt spray of distant oceans to those who have chosen different paths through life's infinite possibilities. Your last conscious thoughts drift toward tomorrow's work, the commissions waiting for completion, and the eternal hope that your next brushstroke might be the one that achieves perfect harmony between intention and execution. The pursuit of artistic excellence requires this kind of faith, the belief that persistence and dedication will eventually yield moments of transcendence when technique disappears and pure creative vision flows unimpeded from heart to hand to canvas. Sleep finally claims you completely, bringing the deep rest that allows tired muscles to recover and creative spirits to regenerate for another day's work in service to beauty, truth, and the timeless human impulse to create something lasting from the ephemeral materials of earthly existence. Your dreams shimmer with impossible colors and perfect forms, offering glimpses of artistic achievements that inspire tomorrow's efforts, while providing tonight's peaceful conclusion to another day in the life of a Renaissance painter. Sweet dreams, gentle listener. May your own creative spirits find inspiration in these glimpses of artistic dedication, and may you wake tomorrow with renewed appreciation for the countless hands that have labored throughout history